you can. You good? Is that close enough to her? Everything good? They have the spelling of your name.
What's that?
They have the correct spelling of your name.
Okay. We all set? All good? Good morning. My name's Victoria Cummock. In December of 1988, like so many other families, my 3 small children and I were waiting for the arrival of Santa and for their Daddy John to come home from a London business trip. 4 days before Christmas, John, among 259 passengers and crew, boarded Pan American Flight 103, a U.S. flagged 747 flying from London to New York. Approximately 38 minutes into the flight, at 31,000 feet, the terrorist bomb exploded on board, scattering the 259 souls, the airplane contents and debris, over 845 square miles on the serene countryside and town of Lockerbie, Scotland. At that moment, 270 lives were shattered, and thousands of victims' loved ones from 21 nations were left to pick up the pieces. Regular people like you and me began a stalwart quest to ensure justice would be served by identifying and holding accountable all those responsible for the second most deadly terrorist attack against America in U.S. history. The victims' families pledged to pursue justice, and this is my 3-decade-old promise to my husband, John, who was 38 years old. He was my best friend and the father of our 3 very small children. To that end, in 2018, the Pan Am 103 Lockerbie Legacy Foundation was established to codify this historical terrorist attack against America, to remember the 270 victims with a living memorial, to gather first-hand accounts and stories from all the Pan Am 103 Lockerbie global community impacted, and to ensure ongoing vigilance to enhance the protection of the flying public and help enforce victims' and flyers' rights to avoid others from suffering the same fate. Aside from issuing the 1991 criminal indictments against the 2 Libyans, Al-Megrahi and Fima, and the 2020 criminal charges against Massoud, U.S. authorities have never arrested or prosecuted any suspects in 34 years. To the American families, this felt like a betrayal by the U.S. authorities and our government to the thousands of people who regularly pledge their allegiance to America and its flag. The U.S. apprehension and arrest of Libyan terrorist suspect Abu Aguila Mohammed Massoud is the first tangible step made by the U.S. Department of Justice in 34 years to hold any suspect accountable in U.S. courts. U.S. federal courts have the jurisdiction to prosecute crimes on board U.S. aircrafts, regardless of the location. And multiple jurisdictions routinely try criminals under applicable laws that are national as well as local laws. So today's arraignment that will happen against Massoud in Pretty Man Courthouse in Washington, D.C. is the first significant step to begin to address this 3-decade-long miscarriage of justice. It's the victim's family's fervent wish that U.S. criminal trial proceedings begin immediately. Justice delayed is justice denied. The victims' families are keenly aware that after 34 years, informants and witnesses die, memories fade, and evidence can deteriorate or disappear. On behalf of my family and the families of Pan Am 103 Lockerbie members, I want to express our gratitude to President Biden, a Syracuse University alumnus, and there were 35 Syracuse students that died on that plane. I also want to express our gratitude to the U.S. authorities for today putting actions behind their 34 years of promises and pledges. The time for justice is now. Thank you. If there's any questions, yes?
This subject confessed his crime 10 years ago. What do you say of the fact that it took these 10 years to finally face justice?
Well, back in 2011, I had personally brought a very credible source to the attention of the U.S. Department of Justice, who had signed an affidavit saying that he knew, as former Minister of Justice for Gaddafi, that he knew that Gaddafi, he had proof that Gaddafi had actually ordered the attack on Panam 103 as well as other terrorist attack. I gave the information to the Department of Justice, the sworn affidavit. There's even a book written about it called A Storm in the Desert. The U.S. Department of Justice, State Department, the administration all took this information, and I heard nothing. And our constant request for updates on what the status was nothing, and that was in 2011. In 2011, the same Minister of Justice had become the head of the National Transitional Government in Libya, who was overthrowing the Gaddafi regime. He came to the United Nations representing the Libyan government to try to get a no-fly zone supported by the United Nations. He came with the information and the affidavit that I had given to the U.S. authorities, and for 4 days I sat in the Libyan mission to the UN, and for 4 days they said that Al-Jali, who was the head of the National Transition Council, had said that the U.S. Was not willing to discuss anything about that. Then in 2015, family member Ken Dornstein put together a PBS 3-part documentary entitled My Brother's Bomber. He had, from 2011 and 12, located the many suspects that were still outstanding, and had given the exact information in 2012 to the U.S. authorities. The PBS program, My Brother's Bomber, aired in 2015, and I was with Ken and some of the victims' family members at the Department of Justice with Attorney General Loretta Lynch, and I said, you know, what have you been doing with all this information? Why aren't you, what's the status of this? And she proceeded to tell me that that Libya was a very dangerous place, and that she was waiting to hear from the Scottish partners to see what the next steps were. Frankly, I was stunned, and I said to her, well, first of all, with the Libyan attacks to the U.S. Embassy and CIA annex in Libya, within months, the U.S. government had gone into Benghazi, had gone into Libya, captured the suspects, brought them to trial in the U.S., and they were prosecuted and now we're serving sentences. That's the same Libya that you're saying is too dangerous for you to go in to pursue suspects for the Panam 103 bombing and murder of 190 Americans. And she said, well, it is a very dangerous place. And I said, well, not any more dangerous than it was for family member Ken Dornstein, a nice Jewish man whose brother had been killed, for him to go in there on his own. So we really feel that there has been some sort of obstruction of justice going on, because there have been credible sourcing and finding of individuals that have been given to the department. And again, if you look at the actual indictments and criminal charges against Massoud, it says that his interview was done over a decade ahead of time.
You've made your life's work pursuing justice for all of these families, including your own. What was it like to get the news that he was in U.S. custody finally, almost exactly 34 years later?
I was finally, for the first time in 34 years, I was hopeful that we could have one of the perpetrators come to a U.S. courtroom and hold them accountable. It was the first time that I was hopeful. I wasn't sure if, within my lifetime, we would be able to see the day. So this is a significant milestone for me, my families, and all the families of those killed.
Do you have any new information about the arraignment? Have you been in touch with the Department of Justice?
Yes, the arraignment will happen at 1 p.m. today, and it is at the, hang on,
I have the information.
Freddie Men Courthouse in Washington, D.C., and Terry can give you the exact information, but it is scheduled right now for 1 p.m., but it might be pushed back. Family member and also board of director member of the Pan Am 103 Lockerbie Foundation, Paul Hudson, will be at the courthouse representing all of us. And Terry can also provide you his contact information if you'd like to reach him.
You said it provided a sense of hope. Has there been, what has it been like the last 34 years? Has it been frustration? Has it been, were you reaching a point of, you said you didn't think you were going to see it in your lifetime. Was it a point of apathy? I mean, where were you, how were you feeling leading up to this?
Well, I think all of the family members, particularly the American ones, have been felt betrayed, and but if nothing else you can say about me, I'm persistent, and I think so many of us who pledged to find justice. This button here, Pan Am 103, Time for Justice, was created in 1989. And whenever I would go to Washington, whether I was working at the White House on the Presidential Commission for Bill Clinton, a meeting with George Bush, meeting with the different attorney generals, this was on my lapel. And as I said, this was the love of my life, and I had promised him that I would make sure until my dying breath that I was going to do what I could to pursue justice, as have many of the other family members, because this has not been my quest alone.
What outcome are you hoping for Masood to come in if it goes to criminal trial in D.C.? What do you and the other family members of the victims hoping for judicially?
Well, it is going to come to a U.S. criminal trial in D.C., and our hope is that we'll be able to find out what he knows, and hopefully he'll be able to identify other co-conspirators so we can also bring them to justice. But so far he has claimed responsibility for actually making the bomb and getting it, to the location where it was put on Pan Am 103.
Abdul Basit Meragi's family has been fighting to clear his innocent over in the court in Scotland. Do you have any thoughts on that family's and their claims?
Well, I know the only suspect that was found guilty in a Scottish court was al-Megrahi, and he was given a lifelong sentence. But the difference why we have always been demanding that our cases be tried in the U.S. under U.S. law is that there's so many differences between U.S. law and Scottish law. For instance, they have no life sentence. They have a life sentence that is only 20 years is the maximum. They have no death penalty. They also, the admissibility of evidence is very different. Unless somebody can corroborate specific information that they have found. For instance, they had found FEMA's diaries where he had written that he was going to Malta and was involved in the operation, but since nobody could corroborate that they had seen him write in that diary, they couldn't admit that into court. Whereas in U.S. courts, they can grab that diary and have handwriting experts compare beyond a reasonable doubt that that was FEMA's diary, that was his handwriting, and he in fact was involved. So it was a very different system. In terms of Al-Megrahi's conviction, I don't understand Scottish law, so I really didn't understand the nuances of his conviction. And I know that right now there are many aspects of his conviction that are in conflict with the charges against Masood. So we're just going to have to go to the courthouse and hear the specifics of all of that.
We'll go ahead and get some quick cutaways.
Ms. Thomas, do you feel comfortable at all saying anything in Spanish?
If you don't mind broken Spanish.
Oh, bueno. Sí, ya está.
O sea, ¿cómo te sientes hoy?
Pues, ¿quieres esperar el sonido?
Sí, por favor.
This is really a very quiet place until the neighbors, I guess, see media here, and then everybody takes out their trash cans and starts moving around their cars. And sorry about that.
Listo. ¿Cómo se siente usted hoy?
Hoy día tengo mucha esperanza que por fin vamos a poder comenzar, sorry, how do you say, trial?
El juicio. Un
Oh.
juicio.
Hoy día tengo mucha esperanza que después de 34 años por fin vamos a comenzar el juicio contra el terrorista Masood que mató a mi marido John y 270 personas.
Y para usted este ha sido su trabajo de toda su vida. ¿Usted le hizo una promesa a su esposo?
Sí, como muchos de los familiares de los víctimas, hace 34 años, yo prometí a John que yo iba a dedicar mi vida para traer justicia para su muerte y la muerte de todas las víctimas.
Y para las personas que no han seguido el caso, ¿por qué este caso ha sido algo tan diferente? O sea, dos otras personas han ido a juicio, uno salió de la cárcel, pero en este caso, ¿qué es diferente?
Porque todo eso pasó en Escocia, con la ley de Escocia, y no tenía nada que ver con el caso que debía estar enjuiciado aquí en los Estados Unidos, porque la bomba se había puesto en un avión con la bandera americana. Era el vuelo de Pan American 103.
Y las leyes de Escocia y Estados Unidos son diferentes, y usted piensa que ahora va a tener un resultado diferente.
Esperemos que sí, porque ahora están en las manos del sistema de los Estados Unidos, y esto va a ser la primera vez en 34 años que vamos a poder seguir una investigación y un juicio apropiado.
Y usted dijo en inglés que este es el primer paso tangible hacia la justicia. ¿Usted pensó que iba a ver este día?
Solo con esperanza, porque yo no sabía, cada año que pasaba y que no es, el gobierno de los Estados Unidos no estaba trayendo a esta gente para los Estados Unidos para enjuiciarlo, era bien difícil tener mucha esperanza, pero por fin ahora yo y los familiares sí tenemos esperanza que por fin vamos a comenzar este paso.
Y por último, usted dijo en inglés que se sentía traicionada por el gobierno de Estados Unidos. O sea, ¿puedes repetir eso?
Sí, pues los familiares de todos los 190 víctimas americanos, sí, sentíamos que el gobierno había traicionado toda la gente americana que
Que murió.
que murió. How do you say pledge allegiance to the American flag? Sorry.
Sí, no, o sea, si
Pero,
usted
pero al
siente...
mismo tiempo usted estaba diciendo que le agradece ahora que llegaron a este
Sí,
punto.
que yo agradezco al presidente Biden y también las autoridades del Departamento de Justicia que por fin están tomando acciones después de 34 años para todos los prometes que habían hecho para traer este caso y justicia a la familia de los americanos.
Este hombre que va a juicio hoy, usted dice que sí saben que llegó la bomba hasta el avión. ¿Cómo fue esa parte que usted contó?
Pues sí, tienen documentos y también Masud ha dicho que él sí armó la bomba y ayudó a meter la bomba en el vuelo de Pan Am 103.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Anybody else?
One more. How would you like John to be remembered?
Well, John Cummock was your typical American man of Scottish descent. He was bright, he was caring, he was very compassionate. He was really involved in the community with community causes, supporting community causes, as well as he was a really involved father. So I know that if I had been on that plane, that John Cummock would have been trying to push for justice on the Americans' behalf, on the victims' behalf, just like I have. But he probably would have gotten to justice sooner than me. So I find it so sad that my children were only 3, 4, and 6, and they really never got to spend very much time with their father because he really was a remarkable human being. Thank you.
Everybody, who here would like a one-on-one, and then we can coordinate that. So we have previous 4, Miami Herald. Okay, so let's go with Miami Herald to do a one-on-one with you wherever
Sure.
you could do it here. Could you do it here? Okay.
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 It's just us, and I'm gonna